Hello everybody, this is Catholic Dad episode number 155, the history of rickets. I don't know if everybody knows what a rickets is, and I'm a radiologist, by the way, so I'm a physician, I deal with this stuff. Well, nobody deals with rickets anymore anyway, but rickets is essentially a vitamin D deficiency. Vitamin D is necessary for the history of bone growth, and it gives you things like osteomalacia, meaning soft bones, or bending bone disease, or bow-leggedness, and so on and so forth. Now, when I was in training in radiology, a lot of the board cases that we used to have to discuss showed rickets on x-ray, and there are some pretty distinct, unique findings on the x-ray findings. And the reason why we had to memorize these things is because old people in academic medicine used to force us to memorize the stuff that they used to see. And rickets, or juvenile osteomalacia, was actually quite prominent up until the 40s, 40s essentially, in America, and you can actually, by the end of the wintertime, you could have kids with bones that were bent and deformed by the end of the wintertime, and they would have pathologic fractures and broken bones and so on and so forth. But you don't see rickets anymore. You don't see rickets anymore because of nutritional causes, right? The food supplies are amazing. Everybody can eat all the food they want throughout the year. You're going to get oranges any times of year, fruits, vegetables, you name it. The food supply is incredible compared to what it used to be in the 40s and 50s. Now, this is something to think about, because I just read a study from the late 1800s. It was an autopsy study done by a pathologist on kids that died, so childhood deaths. And he reported that 96% of kids at autopsy had rickets. Okay, now rickets doesn't really exist anymore, right? And it wasn't 96% of the population back in the late 1800s, it just wasn't. But out of the kids of childhood deaths, the percent of the kids that had rickets was 96%. Now, if you get 96%, that's virtually everybody in the entire childhood population had rickets who died, which means that rickets either killed them, which I don't think it did, or it was a marker of something bigger. Now, if you don't have, vitamin D, and you don't have the adequate dietary supply of vitamin D, which is, found in milk and, animal proteins and fish and stuff like that, then that means 96% of the kids that died in the late 1800s were malnourished. That's what it means. Now, let's fast forward to today, because like I work in medicine, and everybody in the world wants to believe that medicine has done everything for life expectancy and the health of children, and like vaccines and you name it, that kids are living longer because of all these vaccinations, early intervention, bicycle helmets, you name it. But if 96% of all childhood deaths in the late 1800s were associated with rickets, and we don't have rickets anymore, and we virtually don't have childhood deaths anymore, then why on earth would medicine take credit for that? Because it doesn't make any sense to me that if the kids that died in the late 1800s were malnourished, but now we don't have malnourished children and nobody's dying, why wouldn't we say that maybe the food supply did it, right? Because, and here's the interesting part, if you look at all the vaccine preventable illnesses, the measles, mumps, rubella, rotavirus, whatever else, the death from those viruses were essentially zero by the time, it was zero, it was a couple hundred a year, right? By the time the vaccines were introduced, which means that all the survival benefits from those, infectious diseases were attained before we actually created a vaccine for those illnesses to be wiped off the face of the earth. And so, things that make you go, I'm really curious, because everybody's claiming, if we just stop vaccinating our kids, all these infectious diseases would come back and kids would start dying at higher rates and stuff like that. It might not be true. In fact, I suspect it's probably not, because 50 to 60% of kids got their vaccines in the 80s, and I don't remember outbreaks of anything in the 1980s when I was growing up. But beyond that, kids are not malnourished these days. And back in the 1800s, when these infectious diseases were killing a whole host of kids, they had rickets, they had vitamin D deficiencies, they were therefore malnourished. And if they're malnourished, then their immune systems aren't ready to go. You know, if your bones are failing, then your immune system's probably failing as well. And so, this is Catholic Dad making you think about it. Please don't swallow all the, all the propaganda that medicine sells you, because I've been in this business a long time, and I see lie after lie after lie perpetrated by physicians like my colleagues. They just repeat it because they learned it in med school, but not because they thought about it or it was ever proven to them. And so most of the gains in medicine, I suspect, are related to sanitation and food. There are things we do that do benefit people in their lives, and I'm not saying don't go to the doctor, but just think about that. Things that make you go, You don't have to run and fear for your lives every time the CDC or the HHS or the FDA tells you there's going to be a rash of outbreak of something. It's probably not going to cause much harm. So this is Catholic Dad making you think about it. Please like or subscribe. Get the Mass and pray the daily rosary. Okay.